Hello and welcome to the Catholic Challenge. I'm your host, Luke Lancaster, and today we're going to be talking about a really important topic. It's a topic that is really large in our nation. It's extremely common in our culture, and that's pornography. Pornography is a $97 billion industry in the world right now. Right? So if it's such a major player in society, why does the Catholic Church say that it's wrong? The Catholic Church teaches that it is an evil thing to watch pornography or to engage in it. But we're mainly going to focus today on why it's wrong to watch it. So today I brought with me one of my old professors from Ave Maria University. Her name is Dr. Janice Breidenbach.
Hi,
for
Luke.
coming
Yeah,
on
it's great
today.
to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. She has been teaching at Ave Maria University as a philosophy professor, and you're also tied in with the Aquinas Institute at the University of Oxford too,
Yes, that's
which is
right.
awesome.
Yeah.
How long have you been with Oxford?
That relationship began in 2017. So they just I just love the Dominicans at Oxford, and they've been very gracious in having me, sort of give talks and help with some of the seminars. So I've tried to go back as many summers as I can, and it's always a kind of revitalizing experience, something that I feel I can really bring back in many positive ways to my work at Ave Maria. So,
Sure. Awesome. All right, so with all this knowledge of philosophy, we're going to be tapping into that for this topic of pornography, why the church teaches that it's wrong, what the philosophical basis behind it is, like why, the reasons. All right, so first we got to give a definition of pornography. So Cornell Law School gave a definition of it that I thought was pretty solid. They said, quote, pornography, porn or porno for short, is material that depicts nudity or sexual acts for the purpose of sexual stimulation, close quote. All right, so the first thing that we got to talk about is the philosophical reason. Why is philosophy teach, and the Catholic Church utilize philosophy to teach, that pornography is wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can think about this in sort of two main ways. Like we can think, okay, there are theological arguments against pornography, and then there are maybe more non-theological or secular arguments against it. So that someone who isn't even Catholic or doesn't even believe in God can also affirm, right, some of what the church is saying about pornography. So I mean, to begin with the theological teachings, we know that marriage, according to the church, is a sacrament. And there is a meaning to the marriage act, right, as Elizabeth Anscombe, the British philosopher, calls sexual intercourse. It's a marriage act, right? Even outside of marriage, right, outside the formal confines of marriage, to engage in this kind of behavior is, right, still a marriage act. And so to say that it is to define sex as having, right, the church says, and as we know, right, having these dual meanings of being unitive as well as procreative. And it becomes very clear when we think about this, right, that these are meanings to an action that have to exist within marriage as a sacrament, right, as something that's monogamous, as exclusive, as between man and woman, right, when we think about these meanings anyway, right? Yeah. And pornography, right, as a kind of visual depiction of, right, I mean, according to that Cornell definition, right, a kind of visual depiction of really this marriage act, but for the purpose of stimulation, right? Really just very clearly severs, right, these meanings, right, from the marriage act itself.
Yeah, I think it ties in with what John Paul II said in his Theology of the Body, teaching about just how it's a complete and total gift of self.
Right.
That's the language of the body when you express in the sexual act a gift of self, total and complete. That's, like we have body language, like that kind of expresses the way we feel, or the way we think. Like I'm anxious, or so I'm like, or if I'm really confident, like there's obvious indications with their body, and so John Paul II says the language of the body in the sexual act is like what you said, a marital act, a total and complete gift of self to the
Right.
other.
Yeah.
And it just implies a bond there. It implies a spiritual bond.
It expresses these meanings. And
Yeah.
right, we see this especially in, as you say, right, John Paul II's idea of the gift of self, right? Through this act, right, it has its highest expression in the act as a kind of act that we say is life-giving, right? Such that the love between a man and a woman, right, will actually result in a concrete sort of token, you might say, right? It's not just that, right, these are acts that, right, these are just expressions of love for one another. I mean, it is that, right? And the church says it's more than that, right? It's an expression of love that results in an actual embodied sort of token of that love, right? And that's a child, right? I mean, which is, right, an immortal soul that God sort of infuses into the love itself, right? So it's really, I mean, the church's teaching is beautiful on this, and you've asked me to speak on, I think, a very hard topic, right? Because pornography is pretty much the worst possible perversion of sort of this, right, this understanding of the marital act. I don't think for a second that anyone who views porn is thinking about the procreative aspect, right? The fruit of love, right, that comes about from, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's probably for the most part, not between married couples at all. It's pretty much a given. It's not.
Right.
So they're
Yeah.
immediately like breaking up the very nature of the act.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And I mean, you know, porn it's especially dangerous at, you know, when it's cast as a kind of art form, because I mean, when we think about theater and drama, right, like there is simulation, right, there is kind of imitation, right, it's not the real thing, and where porn is so dangerous is that it is the real thing, right? I would say probably the majority of it is the real thing. I mean, you know, I mean, maybe you can speak more to that, right? The industry itself, like when we're talking about hardcore pornography anyway, right, we're no longer in the realm of dramatic, right, sort of imitation or just dramatizations of things, right? This is the real thing, and it's absolutely a perversion of the marital act. And in some cases, I think what we'll talk about, right, it's even worse than right, sort of a form of prostitution or adultery. Like in some cases, it is rape, right? It is actually rape. So. So anyway, we're really far away from the church's teachings on this. I can't even think of a plausible argument for a Catholic to say that it is compatible with the Catholic faith, right? To view to view pornography, to engage in it.
Yeah, and then of course it also just causes us to view other people as things. Like they're no longer subjects. They're no longer people. They've just been totally dehumanized. You know, that's I remember learning in class about Hitler and the Nazis, and how what they would do is they would try to dehumanize the Jewish people so that it was easier for them to take their lives.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so like this idea of making a person kind of like a candy bar, thing you use, you throw away, like it's not even. You know, so that's just like the way that it's causing us to view people. It's reworking our brains when you watch porn.
Right. So yeah. So this I think leads very, very efficiently into the secular philosophical arguments, right? That you know, some people will just accuse Christians and Catholics as just being kind of puritanical, right? Like we're too uptight, right, about sexual matters and things like this. And the truth is that there exists a lot of philosophical arguments, right, that don't, you know, rest on theological premises, like don't require us to, you know, believe that, right, we can't do this just because God has said so, right? Even people who don't necessarily view marriage as a sacrament, right, will recognize that there is a kind of real violation of dignity of the person, right, in sort of the production of pornography as well as the use of it, right? So one of these philosophical traditions is Immanuel Kant, right? So this German philosopher who, among other things, right? So Kant wasn't, you might say, right about everything, but he did sort of have a very interesting teaching about whether we can ever use a human being as a means to an end, right? So there's an interesting implication to this, which is that Kant seems to be saying that even my taxi driver, right? I cannot treat him as if he is merely a means to an end, right? I must see him, right? Comprehend him as an end in himself, right? Because there is a kind of intrinsic value there that is, he thinks, categorical, right? It's absolute, right? It's not conditional. We can't say, well, I'll treat someone as an end if they're my spouse, right? Or I'll treat someone, right, as an end in themselves. I'll treat them as valuable in themselves if, right, they give me enough money, right, whatever, right? Like, there are no conditions, right, where the human person is concerned, right? So there's a very strong link between, I think, a kind of the Kantian requirement that we care about others, right, as ends in themselves, which pornography clearly violates, right? Both the production of it as well as the use. Between that strand of thought as well as personalism, right? So of course, like you mentioned, like John Paul II, right? He's famous for kind of personalist philosophy, which is very beautiful, right? And in many ways adopts this idea, right? This kind of Kantian idea that, right, the human person is irreducible, right? That there's a value here that, right, no quantification, no system, right, no amount of money, right, can ever sort of render us a means to an end.
Yeah, I think that ties in really nicely with like just the saints that the church has produced, like, because you see the person as a subject and not just as a means to an end. You don't see them as a thing or an object, but because they're persons. That's why you've got people like Mother Teresa, like, serving the poor in a radical way in Calcutta, because you see the person rather than just a thing that you use, which pornography is just training your brain to do. It trains your brain to see people as things.
Absolutely.
There's actually a number of studies that have been produced that show this. You see on the screen here of how those who watch pornography begin to view people as objects or things to be used. And there's numerous studies. You've got study number 1, study number 2, and study number 3. That you can just analyze those studies, and they show exactly what we're saying here, right? So science itself has demonstrated this, that there's an objectification that your brain is being trained to do, right? So you're not going to produce a Mother Teresa if you are constantly viewing pornography, because you're training your brain to see people as things.
Yeah, it's very worrisome. I think these studies that you're examining, right, are showing that this really affects people's behavior in real life, right? So it's not really possible for us to see, right, pornography as just kind of this recreational thing that someone does, right, during certain parts of the day, right, and there it is, sort of compartmentalized, right, and it's okay, right, maybe it's a little naughty to do this, right, but it doesn't, it doesn't affect my career, right? It doesn't affect my ability to be a family man, someone might say, or family, or a good mother, right? And I think this kind of research is showing that there is change in the brain, right, that is occurring. There are other studies, by the way, showing that, right, people addicted, right, to pornography or compulsive users of it actually have like less matter, like the matter that really matters in the brain, right? That maybe, I think it's the prefrontal cortex, right? There's less synaptical activity going on, right? So there's something very bad happening, right? That is actually harming someone physiologically, and not to mention, of course, harming their relationships as well. In real life.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, a lot of people in Hollywood have even like picked up on this. For example, Terry Crews, he was a famous actor in Hollywood. You see on the screen there, it's got a post about what he has to say. He says, quote, "My issue was, and is with pornography, is that it changes the way you think about people. People become objects. People become body parts. They become things to be used rather than people to be loved." And that just hits the nail right on the head. I remember watching Terry Crews from that TV show, Everybody Hates Chris, as a kid, and like he played the dad in the show, and he recognizes just the evil that's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, you need not be Catholic, right? I mean, here's another one,
and then you even got another actor, Josh Radnor. He said this, quote, Porn peddles selfishness, domination, and oppression, all terrible qualities to bring to a relationship. It strips women of personality, agency, and dimensionality, reducing them to objects who exist simply for man's sexual pleasure. And Josh Radnor is a popular actor in Hollywood as well. Right? The various actors have said various things. You can find a lot of quotes from an organization called FightTheNewDrug.com. Yeah, so it's so clear there. And we're going to go to a quick break, and then we're just going to come right back into this topic and cover more of the reasons why the church is against pornography. So I'll see you in a minute. We're back to the Catholic Challenge. I'm your host, Luke, and we're continuing our conversation on pornography and why the church teaches that it's wrong. So we've already covered a few reasons, but there's plenty more to go over. So why don't you kick off another one for us, Dr. Breidenbach?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think so. The quotes that you were showing, right, really illustrate the way in which seeing someone as a subject rather than an object, it is a matter of enculturation. And I think, there's something very interesting in the way the church teaches us to try to see Jesus in people, right? And I think Mother Teresa talks about this a lot, right? Like you see Jesus in the person that you're helping, like the poorest of the poor. And people who don't have Jesus don't have that, right? Like they don't have that perspective of, actually seeing God, right? Like sort of the elevation of the dignity of a person, even to the divine, right, in another. But I think it might be interesting to mention, right, some of the secular feminist arguments against pornography.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, so Catherine McKinnon, is one of these sort of professors of law who has, her book is a bit graphic. I must say, like it's difficult to read, but she is citing a lot of like the people in the industry, right, who have been exploited, right, and there's a lot of sort of graphic depiction of this, but there's also a concern here with the way in which pornography sort of sets the environment in which women live, right? So the feminist argument is that, right, pornography in conditioning men to view women as objects rather than subjects, and she would say that's putting it mildly, right?
Yeah.
But in conditioning men to view women a certain way, right, they are, right, the environment, the landscape in which men and women work together changes, right? And it changes such that a woman actually cannot be comfortable, like working, right, in the environment in which she does, right? I mean, she goes so far as to say, look, if someone wants to defend pornography as a form of free speech, right, they must sort of address the fundamental problem that pornography actually results in a lack of freedom of speech for women, right? Meaning, right, the conditions are so much changed that, right, a man cannot even listen to what a woman has to say, right, given that, right, she's not viewed as a person, right? Like you can only believe that someone who is a person has something to say or something valuable or is actually free, right?
Yeah.
So
what book is this?
Well, yeah, so it's her book, this is a while ago, a few decades ago. It's called Only Words.
Only Words.
Yeah. And I'm not sure I would recommend it to the, a kind of general, there are just a lot of graphic details in it that personally, like, I find a little bit unnecessary. But, this is, I mean, I think it's important to note that, she and Andrea Dworkin, right, these like very, by the way, like, pro-choice sort of feminists, right, but otherwise like are very, very vehemently against pornography as being a source of disempowerment for women.
Yeah, so you don't even have to, you don't have to be Catholic to recognize the evil of it.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think another point that we can make as well, and in addition to all those, is divorce rates.
Right.
Divorce actually can increase, according to numerous studies, if you're on pornography, because the partner feels like they're being cheated on. Like it's like you're participating in getting aroused through something on a screen. Yeah. Like you don't even know these people or whatever is going on there. All you are is like it's like you're leaving your spouse and like finding another. Yeah. And so it feels like you're like being cheated on.
I would go further and say it's not just feeling like you're being cheated on. Like I would say it is a form of adultery. Like it objectively is adultery. And so it's no surprise that it would lead to divorce, right? It is a form of infidelity. And there's all this talk about the metaverse. Is that what it's called? Metaverse? Like the Mark Zuckerberg's, right? Sort of this like virtual reality world, right?
I've heard of this, yeah.
That is kind of like taking us all by surprise, but really when you think about it, we've been living in this kind of virtual reality. I mean, a lot of people do anyway, right? And just being sort of obsessed with, right, sort of what our phones and iPads and computers are feeding us all the time, right? Being surrounded by this, right? The social media feeds, right? And right, pornography as being one of these, right, interactive kind of virtual reality experiences, right? I mean, it's only the first step to, right, a kind of virtual reality agency that, you know, we're going to say, I'm not culpable, I'm not responsible for what I do in that virtual reality. But the truth is that we still are, right? And it's very worrisome. So
yeah, for sure. And there's just been numerous studies that have shown that divorce and pornography go together. If you see on the screen there, porn consumers are twice as likely to later get divorced, according to 3 studies. Yeah, you see there, Perry and Davis, and then Perry and Schleifer. Right? All of these different studies are just pointing out the obvious, that it's just leading to divorce. And like, divorce is never a good thing. Divorce tears apart families. And so the fact that consuming pornography increases that is extremely worrisome and should be a major red flag to anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what's also sad is that you always, you know, hear some people claiming that pornography has helped their marriage, right? Like they'll say things like, you know, this is part of our marriage therapy, right? You know, like we watch it together and it's helped our sex life or something, you know. And I mean, I think we would note that there's something wrong with someone who thinks that, right, pornography is necessary for, right, for the betterment of a marriage. I mean, what is a marriage then, right?
Yeah.
Is it just sort of, you know, the sensual activity, right, the pleasure that one gets out of marriage, right?
Yeah, or these deeper concepts of like total gift of self.
Yeah, commitment, right, a deeper kind of love, right, a love that, well, is Platonic, right? I mean, as Plato argued, is far greater and higher, right? Not to denigrate sex at all, right? But that, you know, there will come a time in a couple's life, right, when if they're really faithful to one another, that they're no longer physically intimate. And what then, right? Like what then, like when there's no more bodily pleasure, right? Like what is marriage anyway, right? Is it just, right, a kind of contract, right, that, right, we're going to enjoy each other's bodies, right, until death do we part, right, or until the bodies no longer work anymore, right? So anyway, I mean, it's a very shallow and worrisome view of what marriage is really about.
The depth.
Yeah.
The depth of love and sacrifice and trying to be Christ on earth.
Yeah.
Actually, Terry Crews had said another quote that I thought was really, really good. He talking about his own marriage. He had said, quote, "Pornography is an intimacy killer. It just started building up a wall." He's talking about his own use of it. "A lot of people get divorced and they don't even understand how the separation began. It wasn't that she, that is his wife, caught me watching porn. She was like, something is wrong with you. And I finally had to admit it was a problem. I realized I couldn't stop." Close quote there, right? So what he's emphasizing there is the addiction. Right? He's recognizing the part where he's leaving his spouse and going for another, basically. And it's in a virtual kind of reality there, but he's leaving his spouse.
Right. Yeah. And how can a woman compete?
Yeah.
How can a woman in real life, right?
Yeah.
Without the airbrushing, right, of technology, without the lighting, right?
Yeah, everything is totally like designed for something different.
Yeah.
You know, it's not
no
longer.
Like married life has, you know, it has like you actually have to live with someone and eat dinner together and do the dishes, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not, right? So like how can a spouse compete if, right, one of them is constantly escaping to this fantasy land in which, right, it's all about this like the basest kind of sensual pleasure, right?
Yeah.
That's just not what marriage actually is mostly about, right? So
that love is a sacrifice that you that you want the good of the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no even equation of the other when you're consuming pornography.
Which, by the way, is why the church says don't live together, right, before marriage. It's like learn how to see the good in the other that is spiritual, that is all the like the aspects of someone's personality, right, that are going to matter, like because you're going to live together and do the dishes and vacuum the house, right, together. And that's what really is going to matter, right, for marriage. It's like, can we have conversations with one another? Do we enjoy each other when it's non-physical, right? And I mean, all of this is not to say that the physical is bad. Of course, it's a beautiful gift from God. But again, right, all of that, right, is pointing in the direction of a much higher thing, right? Which is why we say married love is a vocation. It's a vocation for holiness, and not just a means to physical bodily enjoyment, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's something deep there, and I think another really powerful argument against watching pornography is just recognizing the evil that's going on within the porn industry. It's actually really disgusting. I mean, if you research, if you go on the internet and you type in this article by the New York Times called "Pornhub Rape Trafficking," right? Just type that in to the New York Times, and this guy goes through all these different testimonies and lawsuits that demonstrate how pornography websites have non-consensual sex on them. They have rape. And there's no way for them sometimes to even know if it was rape or not, because Pornhub, for example, is just kind of like YouTube. You can just upload a video, and people, like, how are you going to know for certain if they were raped or not? When, you know, the problem is that they're not really consulting all the different testimonies of people coming out of the porn industry, or people who were filmed, or like all these different lawsuits that are against the porn websites, you know, demonstrating that there was rape going on. There wasn't even like consensual stuff that you're watching, that you're trying to consume. So like you're basically supporting that and encouraging that and helping them profit when you watch pornography. So I think that's a killer one. And
it's
then,
appalling. Yeah,
and like, it just keeps getting worse and worse if you continue to research the evils of these different organizations that are producing pornography on a mass scale. For example, if you learn about some of these people that like you see on billboards or maybe on a newspaper that say, "Have you seen me?" And these different ads. Some of those people have been like sex trafficked, and then the sex traffickers like get pornography from these people that they are enslaving, and then they're posting it onto websites like Pornhub. And Pornhub has no way of knowing that they were a sexual trafficker. Why? Because there's just a massive amount of pornography being uploaded every single day. And also, like I said, it's like YouTube. You can just create an account, upload something. Like there are sex traffickers doing that. As you see in the slide there, there's already been some news articles on this. That you can just click on those links or pause the video if you're watching on YouTube and like look those things up of all the legal battles against them, how it's connected to sex trafficking or to just different lawsuits all over the place. It's just a very messy industry in general.
This is a very messy, complex thing. I mean, I think what I worry about is, right, a porn advocate sort of objecting to what we're saying, and you know, with the claim that, look, okay, some porn, right, was produced by people who were trafficked. You know, some porn was produced by people who were forcibly raped, right, against their will. That's really unfortunate, right? We just need better regulation of this industry, right? You know, we want to support sex workers, right? We want to sort of, you know, give people jobs, right? And this is good, honest work, right? According to like prostitution, right? This has been like an argument out there for a while, right? Is good, honest work. And I think we really need to examine, right, the cult of autonomy, right, which is linked to these, you know, this emphasis on consent, right, that people have, right? As long as you consent to something, you don't have to worry about it, right? You don't have to worry whether it's right. Consent alone is right. Autonomy alone is sort of the criterion, right, for whether or not something should be done. But here's the thing, right? Like people who are trafficked, right? There's a very complex psychological web that's being woven around them, right? Such that a woman, right, or maybe a man, right, may not be very clear about whether they are consenting or not, or whether they have true freedom or not, right? And after all, like, can someone really be free to consent in doing something that is objectively nasty, right? When they're poor, destitute, without family and friends, without a supporting community, right? They're all alone, right? And someone's saying, right, film this video, right? And I'll give you a bed to sleep on, right? I'll give you food to eat and money. Is that really consent, right? I think is the problem.
Yeah, and the fact that you can't get around it. Like if you watch different pornography websites, they have you can never know if the person that you're watching is actually even consenting to it.
Yeah.
So you're again supporting something that you hopefully don't think is right.
Right.
You know? There was actually a scandal with Pornhub. You see on the screen here of, quote, one Pornhub scandal involved the Girls Do Porn production company, which recruited young women for clothed modeling gigs and then pushed them to perform sex videos, claiming that the videos would be sold only as DVDs in other countries and would never go online. Reassured that no one would ever know, some of the women agreed and then were shattered when the footage was aggressively marketed on Pornhub. Close quote. You can look that up, the NewYorkTimes.com. Same article I had referenced earlier, Pornhub, rape, trafficking. That's the type of stuff that you could be watching, and there's no way of you not knowing that you're watching. That is horrible. And then it just continues to get worse and worse. For example, there's even child porn on these websites, and they claim to try to regulate it, but they're doing a horrible job if you actually talk to some of the testimonies.
There's no
regulation, you try to read this, read the testimonies of different people. For example, that same article I had earlier referenced says that Pornhub, if you go on Pornhub, you can type in girls under 18 with no space, or if you type in 14YO, meaning younger, year old, that will lead more than 100,000 videos, right? So it is impossible to even know whether a youth in a video is 14 or 18, of age or not of age. And neither Pornhub nor anyone else has a clear idea of how much content is illegal. Right? It's just like YouTube. Just post it, and they don't even know if the child is underage or not.
Yeah. I have to say, I find these considerations important, but I actually think the sort of objectification, right, the sort of the objective content, right, the way in which it changes the brain and physiologically harms someone to be the strongest, right, sort of case against it.
Absolutely. If it's just changing your mind, it's reworking your brain chemistry.
Right.
To see people as things. You're not going to grow in holiness. You're not going to ever produce a society that's addicted to porn like we are. A society that's producing $97 billion. That's the amount of money this industry is making. A society like that is never going to grow because you don't see people as people. Yeah. They're no longer people.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go to a quick break, and we will see you right back to cover a few more arguments against pornography. We're back to the Catholic Challenge. I'm your host, Luke Lancaster. Continue to go over different reasons against pornography. So another reason, to reject it, I would say, is from science. Even science itself, shows the effects on the brain when you're watching pornography. So, for example, that earlier actor that we had quoted, Josh Radnor, it said this, quote, "Reports of chronic porn watchers detoxing off of porn mirrors classic drug withdrawal." So if you're addicted to porn, and you're trying to get off of it, it creates the same type of withdrawal as if you were trying to get off of any other type of drug. So pornography is literally a drug. So again, Josh Radnor saying, reports of chronic porn watchers detoxing off of porn mirrors classic drug withdrawal. Shakes, sweating, insomnia, depression, inability to focus, suicidal ideation, etc. There are those who say there's no such thing as pornography addiction and that watching porn is harmless. history will not be kind to those people. They'll be the doctors from the 50s in the cigarette ads. Close quote. Now, what this actor, Josh Radnor, is emphasizing here is actually a number of studies that demonstrate that pornography, when you are watching it consistently, it forms an addiction in your brain. There's so much like chemistry that's going on in your brain, and it's similar to tobacco addiction. For example, you've got studies right here. I see 3 of them that I had gathered to post here. All of them just emphasizing this harsh reality that you're watching porn, and then you're basically treating it becomes a drug to your brain.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things to note about this fact, right? That if porn is addictive, which you're right, like many people in the industry want to argue that it's not, right? Many professional medical professionals will say it's not addictive, right? It's not in the handbook, the DSM, right? Sort of, right? But they will say it is compulsive.
Big difference there.
Yeah, big difference, right? Yeah, right? Like it's compulsive, not addictive. But what that suggests to us is firstly that we're not free, right? And like I'll just mention like the philosopher Roger Scruton, right, who has a number of very interesting works, and I do recommend his works. This book in particular is called Beauty, in which he compares porn to a kind of pornography. He says, like slavery, it's a denial of the human subject, a way of negating the moral demand that free beings must treat each other as ends in themselves, right? So again, this Kantian idea, which really is a Christian idea, right? That, right, we're not just talking about the people in the industry, right, who are enslaved, maybe exploited, right? To be a porn user is to enslave oneself, right? In precisely this way, right? And what we know about addiction too is that the dopamine hit always needs to be greater and greater. It always has to increase, right? Right. No sort of user of meth, right, always just wants the same dosage of meth, right? Like you need a bigger and bigger hit, right? So with pornography, the analogy is that, right, softcore, right, Playboy, like is not going to be enough, right? Like soon, right, and there's just so much, right, of the most graphic, hardcore stuff that's available, right? That it's not just that people are possibly being raped to make these videos, right? It's that rape pornography actually is a genre that is very, very popular, apparently, right? And in which someone is perhaps actually raped, or right, someone says, I consent to making a video in which, right, it appears that I'm being raped, right? Which one thinks, well, objectively, like there's very little difference between those things, right? So, and then, like, of course, like from that, you've mentioned like child pornography. It's only one small step, right, to the next sort of, most arousing thing, right? The more arousing thing, right? Because like the sort of requirement for arousal is going to get more and more, right? Just as like the need for like a drug is going to get more and more for someone to get the same satisfaction. Yeah,
and not only that, but like studies have also shown that if you're like always watching this like hardcore pornography, you then become much more likely to do these things, and then sexual assault and rape just can naturally flow. If you see on the screen, there are a few studies that have been quoted here called Sexual Violence as a Sexual Script in Mainstream Online Pornography by the British Journal of Criminology. And you also have one below that, Pornography Viewing Among Fraternity Men, Effects on Bystander Intervention, Rape Myth Acceptance, and Behavioral Intent to Commit Sexual Assault. Read about that one as well. So these different studies that are coming out that are showing how if you're watching very sexually violent pornography, you can even express intent to rape. That's what it can lead to. And it's not like, like most pornography isn't like violent. Actually, no. 1 in 8 of the porn titles that will come up if you type it in on a pornography website, 1 in 8 will be about sexual violence. So, and like just keep spiraling out of control. All of the effects that just come from just watching this one thing of pornography.
I mean, one thing to note about this is that, right, the metaverse and virtual reality, right, is not is not an alternative form of reality that we can compartmentalize sort of out of our lives, right? I mean, the military has long known, right? Like my father worked for, he did a lot of like aerospace engineering contracts, right, with the government when he was alive. And right, one thing that we know that is very effective is doing like doing aerial simulations, right? To like teach people how to fly actually, right? Like how to fly, right, into space, for instance, right? You can't have practice flights all the time into space, right? So you have to do these like simulations that, right, are like really effective forms of virtual reality, right? So if that works, and that's a perfectly fine sort of arena in which like we say, okay, this is good, right? And maybe combat training, you could do the same thing, right? Porn is this kind of form of simulation that is preparing someone for reality, right? And that's where you start getting very worried indeed, right?
Yeah, if they start saying that.
Yeah. I mean, you think not just about like the violence that is endemic to the kind of pornography that's out there, but also the underage, right? The children that, right, are not just, right, the children who are involved in the production of these films, but also the children that will be exploited and sexually assaulted, right, because of people who watch this sort of thing, right?
The whole reason that this industry exists is because people are watching it. The reason that even sexual traffickers can continue to grow and build money is because people are watching it, because they get tons of views on places like Pornhub. If they just upload a video on Pornhub and somebody watches it and they get tons of views, you're directly supporting the evil and continuing it. It's fostering their desire to get more children so that they can traffic them as well, because it only leads to their greater prosperity. So watching it should be 100% no.
I mean, many people, I'm a convert, right, to Catholicism, and people try to warn me, right, so like they would say things like the Catholic Church is so anti-woman, right, and just like oppressive, right, of the female sex and this sort of thing. And really, like when you consider, right, the sort of absolute stance that the church has about this, right, nothing could be further from the truth, right? The church is absolutely pro-woman, right? Like she wants to uphold like the dignity of women, the dignity of our families, right? Keep families intact, right? Also keep the dignity of children intact, right? That period of innocence that really is kind of unfathomable, like how much evil is out there, right? Like I find this like probably the hardest topic actually to talk about within moral issues.
Absolutely.
And it's for this, it's extremely evil. So
I think if you, the listener, wants to learn more about these topics, you can go to fightthenewdrug.com. They are a totally non-religious organization, and they have tons of scientific studies. That's where I got most of this material from. Fight the New Drug is a, like I said, non-religious organization that's just dedicated to eradicating pornography because it kills love, right? You treat people as things, no longer as subjects. They're objects to you. And then also Matt Fradd, he wrote a book called The Porn Myth. And this also is a non-religious book that just shows secular arguments for why you should reject pornography, right? It's called The Porn Myth, Exposing the Reality Behind the Fantasy of Pornography. It's by Matt Fradd, so you can check that out on Amazon if you want to do further reading. I also would recommend two other things. One is a website called nofap.com. It's a popular non-religious group of men fighting against the harmful effects of pornography. And then also there's just an awesome book called Your Brain on Porn. That's by Gary Wilson, and he goes through all of the science of porn addiction, right? And he notices all of the harmful effects of pornography on the brain. So that would be some awesome resources to check out for further reading. Yeah, and those are all the reasons that I've gone over. Do you have any other ones to add, Dr. Breidenbach?
I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah. Perfect. Alrighty, well, thank you to listener for watching, and thank you, Dr. Breidenbach, for coming on. That was a fantastic show, and I think hopefully we've convinced you, the listener, that pornography is not a good thing, and to convince your friends, don't watch it. It's a terribly evil thing to watch. So grace and peace to you, and we'll see you next week. Next week we're going to have Barry Schwartz on. He was the official photographer for the Vatican for clipping pictures of the Shroud of Turin. So he's going to discuss the Shroud of Turin with us. So I'll see you next week, Wednesday at 5 p.m. Next week it's going to go back an hour. So instead of 6 p.m., 5 p.m. So see you then. Grace and peace. Bye-bye.